Hey guys, just wanted to say before we start the video, I hope all of you have a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, a Merry Kwanzaa, and, overall, have a happy holiday. Anyways, hope you enjoy the video. The wind howled as Charles walked through the blizzard. The snow buried his knees. He could feel the snow cling onto his raggedy clothes. Charles gazed everywhere he could, but nothing was visible but snow. The blizzard was getting worse. He searched and searched and searched for shelter, food, something, anything. But nothing could be found. Nothing but snow and wind. Charles found himself growing numb. He almost felt warmth after being in the snow for so long. Seconds, minutes, hours, days even. Charles couldn't tell anymore. Frost crystals formed on his eyebrows and beard, making them feel heavy. After so long, he finally saw something from the snow and the frost. Charles could see a small little shack-looking building. Charles ran through the snow, but from the snow that piled on the ground, it was more like speed walking, and got to the small hut. It looks like it was once fun and colorful, but now the paint has withered away, making it more gray and lifeless. A sign held above the doorway reading, "Boozoo's Magical Toy Store." Charles looked through one of the broken windows on the wall. All he saw were a few wooden boards. He pushed on one of them, the board fallen to the ground. The room was empty. He peeked inside. The door seems to be unlocked from the inside. He tried the doorknob, and the door opened. "Well, would you look at that," Charles said, breathing a sigh of relief. He walked inside, the wind blowing through the establishment before he shut the door. He could still hear the wind, but it was muffled and sounded so much further away than it was. He finally felt his legs and his arms. He ripped off some wood from the walls. What left of it was dry at least, and took the last match he had. Then started a campfire. For the first time in what felt like forever, Charles finally felt warm. He snuggled close to the fire. Its warm orange glow created a sense of comfort and joy. Charles thought back to his past, now comparing it to him in the present, but he realized he had to worry about the future. He looked around the room. It had a few worn-out decorations like rickety shelves, broken brooms, a shattered cup, and a small little wind-up toy. A white rabbit with colorful limbs with different patterns like stripes and polka dots. It reeked of Christmas. "Humbug," Charles said, throwing the toy into a different room, knocking over another cup, shattering it. "I'm surprised Christmas hasn't died off yet from this freezing winter," Charles said with irritation. "But I guess I don't need to worry about Christmas here, ain't that right?" Charles said to no one in particular, realizing that no one else was in the room with him. Charles lay down on the now warm wooden floor, closing his heavy eyelids and falling asleep so he can wake up the next morning to get some food. Charles suddenly woke up, looking out the broken window, the wind still howling like the wolves in the dark nights. It appeared dark outside. "Seriously, it's still night," Charles said grumpily. Charles saw his campfire went out. Great, he thought, that was my last match. As he thought about to find another way to start a fire, he catches a glimpse of light from the corner of his eye. He glances over to the other room and sees some colorful lighting. "What the?" Charles said to himself. He got up from the cold, hard floor and went to go check it out. He went into what looked to be a living room of sorts. It had a dead, leafless Christmas tree with broken and flickering lights. The room itself had worn-out decorations all over it. 3 worn-out presents laid underneath the dead tree, one green with white stripes on it, one yellow with confetti on it, and a white one with colorful ribbons on it, like stripes and polka dots. What's going on here? A decorated room, but dead? I can't choose whether this is better than a normal decorated room, Charles said, contradicting himself on whether he liked the decor in the room or not. Its head turned as the bells, or what few were still attached, jingled as more and more of its face looked at Charles. Charles gasped at the sight of its face. Its face almost looked like the one on the photo on its door, but it was elongated and stretched, like it was melting in the oven. Its teeth and gums were rotted and exposed from its mouth, which was stretched into a frown as if forced to do so. Its empty eye socket stared back at Charles as it spoke. "We've been expecting you for a while," the clown said with a deep, raspy, and shaky voice, like he was holding back tears of sadness. "What is going on here?" Charles demanded in answer to, not of pride, but fear. "Who are you?" "I am the sad ghost of past experiences," the clown said, continuing in its sad, shaky tone of voice, unchanged from a moment ago. "And I'm here to tell you your past experiences, your trauma, every regret you've had," the ghost said, reaching beyond sight within its infinite arms. They appeared from a different side of the void, or whatever they're in, and it comes back with what looked like a thought bubble. "Now, let's take a look," the ghost said, looking down at the cloud-shaped bubble. A tube shot out of the thought bubble, attaching onto Charles's head, but before he could rip it off, the ghost grabbed his hand, slowly shaking his head as he could hear the clicks and sounds of gears whirling like this was nothing but a rusty old robot. It pointed with one long, bony finger and tapped on the thought bubble. Charles soon saw a younger version of himself sitting in a small room at a table with his family. No food appeared to be on the table, and they all had sad expressions, that of pure misery. That's me," Charles said, surprised and amazed by what he was seeing. It was an impressive piece of technology. That Charles knew. "Of course it is. This is your memory, after all," the ghost said in a softer tone, its unblinking socket staring into Charles's soul as Charles grew uncomfortable. Memory bubble showed memories of Charles as a child, his family begging for money on the streets, the eating of rotten food. The horrible lifestyle he had as a child soon came to an end when his parents got sick from food poisoning, but they couldn't afford to go to the hospital, leaving a note that read, "If you're reading this, then we didn't make it. So we wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas. We suggest that you go to the local orphanage for you and your sister's safety." As Charles laid down and cried, curled into a ball at his family's funeral. Charles was brought to tears seeing these horrible memories. He tried so hard to forget the pain, the suffering of his childhood. They say the past affects their actions for their futures, the ghost said, starting to cry as well. Inky, dark tears dripped from his eye sockets, dripping above his elongated jaws. Please, spirit, don't remind me of my past, Charles said, almost sobbing. If you let the past control who you are now, things won't get better for you in neither the past, present, nor future. I understand, Charles spoke, sniffling. Now go. You have others to visit now, the ghost said, slightly pushing Charles away in tears. His tears started to melt his face. And please just remember what we've talked about. Charles tried the doorknob, and it opened. He took one glance back, seeing the cloud melting into a colorful puddle. He exited and entered the same void, now with only 2 doors, as the third one disappeared behind him as he exited. He walked up to the second dusty, rotten door in the row. He saw a yellow sheep with rosy red cheeks, a blue jester hat with golden bells, and a painted face, that of a clown, similar to the sad ghost when he thought about it. Charles twisted the doorknob and entered. The room he entered didn't look as much like a void, more like a void that was decorated. The void was filled with dolls, stuffed animals, and toys of plenty. They were piled up in dust, pieces of broken porcelain, plastic, stuffing, and other toy-like parts scattered the floor, and in the center was an old pink TV-looking box with a face. Its screen was in the shape of a large grin, one eye on the top, while the other hanging on a single spring. 2 buttons were placed on its chin, and the paint was chipped from the dust and darkness of the room. It looked more purple. The TV displayed nothing but static on its screen. This room is inviting, Charles said sarcastically. Don't use your sarcasm in my home, a female's voice echoed in the room. It had a southern accent and sounded both soothing and threatening. Who's there? Charles called out into the sea of toys and dolls. A red, bony hand popped from behind the television. Its long, thin fingers tapped onto the box. A head peeked from the happy-looking box. It was the same yellow sheep from the picture on the wall. The sheep had a large smile that stretched from ear to ear, its rosy cheeks almost invisible from the grin covering up her face paint. A red liquid, maybe face paint, dripping from its eyes. The jester hat looked worn out and old. The hat was falling apart, only being held together by a few threads. It wore a blue bow tie with green polka dots on, which hung loosely on her stitched-up body. Broken Christmas lights tangled all over her body, flickered or burnt out. Why, I'm the jolly ghost of present time, she continued in her southern tone. Well, I used to be jolly, the ghost giggled, stepping away from the colorful box, revealing not much was left on her red skeleton. Not much of whatever fluffy fabric was left on her. What happened? Charles asked as he recoiled from her appearance. Well, that's a long story, and besides, this isn't about me. "This is about you," she said, her grin growing even so slightly wider. "Here, press this here button, and we can see how others are doing," the ghost said, pointing at a button on the TV with her long, lanky finger. Uh, alright, Charles said, hesitantly pressing the button. Nothing but static. The ghost slammed on the box like an old TV as it turned into some families having family dinner with each other, saying grace and resting peacefully, creating jealousy in Charles, who always wanted to have a happy Christmas. Charles started to tear up again, but he was still able to muster up to say angrily, "What did you show me this?" The ghost sheep replied, "Because I just wanted to remind you about the present. That's what I'm here for. And since you don't have nobody in your family, all I can show you is something to make you miserable. Whether it motivates you or makes you feel worse, it doesn't matter to me." Two burnt presents fell from the pile of worn dolls, the lid of the present falling off to reveal two old clown dolls. They were very much falling apart and leaked out red liquid that Charles hoped to be paint or something of that sort. Charles picked up the doll as the sheep stood behind him. He could feel the ghost breathing down his neck. It gave him chills. After picking up the doll, he started to smell smoke. "What's that smell?" He looks at the ghost. One of the light bulbs popped, then another, and another. They were popping left and right as she caught on fire. She screamed in agony, falling onto her pile of dolls, them engulfing into flames. She knocked over the TV, now sparking. The sheep started to melt. Her smile and her eyes grew wider as she became charred and burnt. She looked over to Charles, her arms reaching out in pain, and she gave chase, Charles running around the void, seeing the door, the only thing not catching on fire, and ran. He nearly dodged the sheep, who almost grabbed him with her burning claws. He booked for the door, slamming the door behind him as he could hear the shrieks of pain and anguish. The door now caught on fire as it burned away into nothing but ash. Charles walked up to the final door and said, "Welp, one last door to go through." He swerved the doorknob and entered the room. He was faced with an actual room instead of a void. It had dirty walls that almost looked burnt, and a shabby carpet with a floral pattern on it, one that looked ugly. And on the center of the floor, he saw it again, the wind-up white rabbit toy. He picked up the toy, about to grab the little hand crank thing on its back before a red light flickered behind him. "It's been a while since I've seen someone like you here," someone said behind him with a deep voice that almost sounded stuffy, like his nose was clogged. Charles turned around to see a red light bulb flicker in the darkness. Who are you?" Charles asked, for what felt like the millionth time he said it that night. The figure stepped out of the darkness, revealing to be a stitched-up rabbit. It had white and green fur that had red stains where the stitches were, like dried blood. Its arms and legs had blue and purple stripes and polka dots. Its nose was a red light bulb shape. Cracks in the bowl made the light flicker. It had red buttons on its chest and belly. Its snout, which held the nose, was longer than it should have been. Its snout and ears, which had a similar striped and polka dot pattern as the arms and legs, were crooked, like they weren't shaped right. Its yellow eye had slits for pupils, and yellow crooked teeth, some of which appeared to have fallen off from age. Its arms and legs were torn up to reveal a rusty orange-colored endoskeleton. It adjusted its torn-up blue bow tie before saying, "I am mortality." He glimpsed over to another side of the room. There was a door, maybe a bedroom, maybe a bathroom, maybe a kitchen. He didn't care. He was going to find out. He turned the handle, opening, walking into, without paying attention, and walking straight into a dark, empty room. A void. "What's going on in here?" Charles said before getting interrupted by the door slamming behind him. He turned around, trying to open the door again. It wouldn't budge. He screamed for help, despite knowing no one would find him there. Not in time, at least. He glimpsed back into the darkness and saw a door that wasn't there before. Not just one, though. There was 3 of them. He hesitantly walked towards one of the old, worn-out doors. The first one he walked up to was one of that of a clown. It had a sad expression on its eyeless face. It had red curly hair and a sleeping cap on its head. He turned the knob and entered the room. The room was just as dark as the void he was in. Charles jumped back in shock and mustered the courage to ask, "Does this mean I'm dead?" "We all have our time eventually," it said in its low, menacing tone. "But I don't want to go yet. I haven't even had the time to change myself for the better," Charles yelled to it, stepping back. "No one is ready for it yet, but it appears you have no other choice. But before we get to that, how about I show you your future?" it said, confusing Charles. What do you mean?" Charles asked. The thing didn't respond, just reached into nowhere from behind him and pulled out what looked to be a door. Where did it come from? Charles thought. He decided to not question it, and it's like the other doors, but instead of a picture of someone, it had a picture of a crystal ball. The thing stepped back, raising his arms in the air, gesturing to the door, saying, "Your future awaits." Charles reached for the door and went inside. They were in a graveyard. No, this couldn't be. This must be far into the future, right? Charles soon heard giggling in the distance. He hid behind a tombstone, looking at what looks like 2 people. "Hey, so you know who this guy is?" one of them said. "Yeah, he's a nobody. I mean, look at his grave. It's nothing but a wooden box," the other man chuckled. "Yeah, shall we search for someone else? This guy's grave has nothing of value." "Yeah, besides, I heard Ebenezer's grave was buried with tons of money." They said a few comments before getting out of the grave and walking off into the far distance. Charles walked up to what he presumed to be his final resting place. He looked down and saw an empty coffin. "Where is my body?" Charles asked himself. The thing leaned on the tombstone, putting his hand on the side of his head. His grimace grew wider, a part of fabric ripping. It sounded like a zipper being unzipped. "Spirit," Charles mustered before being interrupted. The thing cut him off, repeating itself. "Please, no need for the formality. Just call me mortality." Mortality, if this is my grave, where am I? Well, it said, raising one of its head. We still need the corpse, the thing said, grabbing Charles before he could run away. Let me go, Charles screamed, the thing's grip growing tighter, and started to drag him to the hole. The thing lifted Charles off the ground, raising him over the hole. The inside of the casket began to catch fire. The fire warmed him up from the 100 feet of dirt he was about to be buried in. Charles kicked and screamed, his legs being off the ground. He felt more unsafe. The smoke started to suffocate him, also blinding him. It's time to go, the thing said, loosening his grip. Please, no, I've learned Christmas is great, okay? Charles screamed out, whether it was true for him or not, but the thing's red nose glowed through the smoke, its eyes slightly in view. The thing's eyes had evil in its tone. It grew its grin wider and let go, but before it did, it looked deep into Charles' soul as he fell into the fiery flames. The sirens rang into the blizzard, the void of snow never ending. So, we know what happened? A fireman said to someone. No, all we know is that this building caught on fire, another fireman said. They go through some files, sending someone in and letting them check the place for any factor in why the building is on fire, or if someone or something is in there. They come out holding something, but the smoke obscured it. What do you find in there? The fireman said. He swiped away the smoke to reveal something that scared all the other firemen. One of the firemen barfed onto the snow, and the others stared in awe. It was a dead body, charred and black. Flakes of skin or ash fell off. They didn't know who it was, but it'd be hard to figure it out by now, so they took what's left of the body to study its remains. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry if the story wasn't all too great. I'll be honest, it was a little hard to try and figure out something to do with a story like this, but I at least hope that y'all had a good time. Again, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever holiday you celebrate, just, Happy Holidays. See ya next time.